Jack Stockwell, and plenty of things to talk about regardless of my silly statements. This might be my last stream in this particular format because my webmaster is flying in from Tampa this weekend while we set up a podcast room so that it'll look a little bit better. And then gives me the format to be able to do several shorter stream podcasts during the week of 15, 20, 25 minutes of daily events that need to be reported, at least reported from the viewpoint that if you don't follow the evening news, you're going to be misinformed. If you do follow the evening news, you're going to be misinformed, which is why this program exists. It's why K-Talk exists. It's why all of the talk show hosts at K-Talk put in the time and effort they do, because you're not going to hear K-Talk's menu that K-Talk has to offer on the evening news. All right, so the MAGA movement, and I will be probably combining several different things together here, jumping around as things jump around in my head. But I wanted to start off with the idea that the MAGA movement, which elected Donald Trump to a second term, despite massive press hysteria, legal witch hunts, questionable election practices, is sharply divided right now on the question of the survivability of nuclear war. There are MAGA people who think we can, and there are MAGA people like Marjorie Taylor Greene who know we can't. And I think for any sane person who has two brain cells to put together, as they say, this should be a no-brainer. Former U.S. President and former Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in Europe, Dwight D. Eisenhower, once quipped, "The only thing worse than losing a nuclear war would be winning a nuclear war." President Reagan was so concerned about this that he embraced LaRouche's proposal for the laser particle beam back in the 1980s to be developed jointly by the USA, by the Soviet Union, and despite the Soviet Union's rejection of Reagan's offer to work together on this for mutually assured destruction possibilities, he announced the Strategic Defense Initiative to render nuclear missiles impotent and obsolete. Today, however, the understanding of what happens in a thermonuclear exchange has been relegated to special courses taught by experts like Stephen Starr and Ted Postel. Children in the civilized Western world today, and I know this by personal experience, are not taught what happened to Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945. And worse, the so-called military experts, including those holding important policy positions like Rear Admiral Thomas Buchanan, director of the Plans and Policy Directorate of the U.S. Strategic Command, have revealed that they consider nuclear war to be winnable. And Buchanan was making these comments a year ago, publicly. Yeah, we could win a nuclear war with the Soviet Union, or with Russia, the Russian Federation, excuse me. He should have been removed from his position for saying that. But this is what Buchanan said last year, 2024. "I think everybody would agree if we have an exchange, then we want to do it in the terms that are most acceptable to the United States. So in terms that are most acceptable to the United States, that puts us in a position to continue to lead the world, right?" Well, of course, after a thermonuclear exchange, according to Buchanan, it's important that the United States be in a position to lead the world. After Washington, D.C. is a smoking ember, yeah. So last week, on June 10th, after President Trump's emergency Camp David summit involving Defense Secretary Hegseth, Secretary of State Rubio, Vice President Vance, and other unnamed, as the press release said, unnamed admirals and generals, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, from her personal social media accounts, where she now has added the disclaimer, views do not reflect the position of the United States government or Department of Defense. She posted this 3.5-minute graphic video about her recent visit to Hiroshima, and I talked about this yesterday, where she showed the images of the aftermath of a nuclear bomb. And she warned that today's nuclear bombs are, the most common ones, are 14 times more powerful than Hiroshima. And for this, of course, she was immediately roasted by the British and the Zionist neocon rags, and in some cases, even by the New Republic editor, Mark Levin, who was probably the loudest war hawk besides Hannity on Fox News. And she was accused of betraying American war heroes by denying the necessity of dropping the bombs to end the war. And there's overwhelming evidence right now that the idea of dropping the bombs was to prevent another 1 million lives being lost trying to take Japan from the beaches, which has been disproven over and over again. Several months earlier, the Emperor of Japan had already offered surrender negotiations to Washington, D.C. That didn't make the news. And there were several generals in the Japanese army already to come out on a beach and lay down their swords. I mean, it was over with. They knew that. But this warmongering faction includes such luminaries as Senator Lindsey Graham. Unfortunately, Michael Flynn has joined this. And today, sometimes even the sane-appearing Roger Stone, who just sent out an email praising Nixon for coming to the aid of Israel with massive material in 1973, seeming to imply by his little comment that Trump should be doing the same thing right now in preparation for the United States war against Iran. And on the other hand, then, you've got Tucker Carlson, still a hero for me, former Trump advisor Douglas McGregor, another hero for me, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's becoming a hero with the stuff she's saying lately, and now even Steve Bannon have come out opposing American involvement in a war with Iran, even not in the most courageous way, by saying, Bannon was saying it would be a betrayal of America first. So in a lengthy post on X, Marjorie Taylor Greene said this: everyone's finding out who are the real America First MAGA people and who were fake and just said it because it was popular. Unfortunately, the list of fakes are becoming quite long and expose themselves quickly. Anyone slobbering for the U.S. to become fully involved in the Israeli-Iran war is not America First MAGA. Wishing for the murder of innocent people is disgusting. We are sick and tired of foreign wars, all of them. And this will quickly engulf the Middle East. BRICS and NATO as countries are required to take a side. Well, it's just been reported that a previously scheduled meeting between Russia and the United States aimed at resolving the ongoing diplomatic tensions has just been canceled by Washington. Even as President Trump pointed out, or pointedly told Canadian Prime Minister Carney that Russia had not been thrown out of the G8. If Russia had not been thrown out of the G8 to make it the G7, this war would never have happened. So I have internally in my mind flip-flopped back and forth on whether I support Trump or not, because these mixed messages that come from Trump is just not going to work anymore. I mean, thanks to the attacks on Russia and Iran within the first 2 weeks of June, I don't know that Trump can any longer be trusted as a negotiator for peace, which he doesn't seem to realize is the case. I mean, the United States and the Trump presidency are also being targeted by a strategy of tension, as seen in these shootings of one fatal of Democratic legislators in Minnesota and this billionaires funded no king rallies across the United States, without these damn fools realizing that these no kings rallies is what is going to lead to a king. History is replete with that. You get enough uprising, you get enough people involved, you call out the military enough, suddenly you have a king. King Stalin, King Hitler, dare I say King Trump? So while I can't predict what my elected President Trump, and I voted for him, not because I was MAGA. I voted for Trump because of the alternative. And I have been doing everything I can to support this administration during the first 100 days that he asked for his critics and whatever else to, just be patient, see what happens the first 100 days. Those 100 days are over with. And now I'm sitting on the edge of my seat with the impending destruction of Israel by this constant raining of hypersonic missiles into Israel. The oil refinery at Haifa is gone. The Ben Gurion airport is gone. Several other things that I can get into here are gone. And the hypersonics aren't stopping. They're keeping coming, which will mean the end of Israel, maybe by the end of this week, as Netanyahu desperately trying to stay out of jail by this attack on Iran. And Iran's had enough of it's not like Iran is not bleeding. While they're waiting for Trump to make up his mind, is he going to become a part of the party? We know that there's all kinds of bombers, B-2s, that are showing up at Diego Garcia. There's something like, was it 60, 65 tankers that are now flying or have arrived in the area of the Middle East, as well as Diego Garcia, because those B-2 bombers have to have 2 refuelings before they could reach Iran. Another aircraft carrier, flotilla is not the right word, carrier group is on its way there. This could be an interesting week before this is all over with. And then on top of that, while seen strolling, of course he's back in the White House now, but seen strolling with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and denouncing Tucker Carlson, boo, President Trump, at the G7 meeting, Trump found time to make it a following ominous post on his Truth Social account, where he said, Iran should have signed the deal. I told him to sign. What a shame, what a waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Now, what are you supposed to do with a commander-in-chief, the President of the United States, warning the people in the capital city of a foreign nation, you better evacuate? I mean, if the United States is now engaging with Israel against Iran, this will not only be the end of Trump's presidency, but maybe the planet as well. If you're late on your IRS payments, go a little bit later. There may not be an IRS before June's over with. Gracious, is it that late already? I need to mute K-Talk for a moment. So, I think Trump will have fallen exactly in the trap over which he fired former British Ambassador Lord Kim flood the zone during his first term. So, is the United States planning to join Israel in attacking Iran? That obviously is the big question this morning. I wonder what the line in Las Vegas is. I wonder what, wonder if it's too late to call in a bet. Of course I'm being ridiculous, because nothing could be more ridiculous than the United States to start bombing Iran. Oh my goodness, just the thought. You know, as I've said before, I haven't had this level of concern since the last 2 weeks of Biden's administration, just before the inauguration, when Biden had said, all right, send those long-range missiles to the Ukraine, which Putin has essentially said, well, by the by there, Mr. Biden, that's an act of war. Be prepared. And then Lavrov, my most famous comment from Lavrov, you don't think we know where Washington, D.C. is? And the Poseidon missile in the stealth submarines off the coast of Washington, probably up into the Chesapeake Bay area, completely undetected. Such craziness. So the reports emerged just overnight of U.S. military movements towards Southwest Asia, as I was saying. According to a report in the War Zone, it's a good place to get information, as many as 30 KC-135s and KC-46 U.S. Air Force air refueling tankers were seen on flight tracking websites heading east from their base in the U.S. over the North Atlantic. I don't know if you have a program on your computer like I do that tracks airplanes in the sky. It's fascinating to watch this stuff. I first noticed it, the KC-135s. Interestingly enough, as I was looking up in the sky out of my office, and I'm on the 6th floor now, not in the old building where I used to be, down in the catacombs. I'm up on the 6th floor, just great view of looking north. And I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, I saw this loop way up in the sky. It looked like it was the form of a racetrack, of a horse racetrack. Kind of a rectangular with rounded ends. And so I immediately went to my aircraft tracking program, and there were 2 KC-135s up there. And they were up there pretty high, but out of the way of Salt Lake's commercial traffic. And you can track where these planes come from. You can track everything about them, practically. Just as I can track flights going in and out of Auckland, New Zealand, or smaller aircraft behavior around Perth, Australia. Or I can look at Israel, and right now, there's no air traffic. There's no air traffic over Israel. And with Ben Gurion Airport destroyed, I don't know how those people are going to get out of there. But anybody with half a brain better get out of Israel as fast as possible. So I was watching this, and they were KC-135s over top of Utah Lake. And they had come out of a base in Missouri. And I could track them all the way across from Missouri to Utah Lake, where they made several laps around this very, very specified, I mean, it must have been training, because they didn't vary more than a few feet altitude-wise, or within that altitude, following that racetrack design. And then I went to take care of a couple of patients and came back and just glued to the screen. And they took off up near middle of Wyoming and then started heading back towards Missouri. But this was over top of Utah, or the Great Salt Lake, at about 30,000 feet. Now I read in the overnight news that these tankers, these refueling tankers, are heading across the North Atlantic. And of course, they'd be across it by now, but not revealed, of course, so you don't know where they're going to land or for what mission they're being deployed, except there's 30 KC-135s and KC-46s shooting across the North Atlantic to Europe. Do you need all of those for a training mission? And this is the last 24 hours. Now, TWZ says this. The mysterious migration could signal a major contingency being put in place or even a change in U.S. policy on the Iran-Israel war. It's so benign, a change in policy. They could soon be supporting the Israeli Air Force, because where did the Israeli Air Force get their Air Force jets? And the Israeli Air Force has very limited air refueling capability of its own. And in its campaign against Iran, they could be intended to support the U.S. entry into this war on the side of Israel. And there's dozens of U.S. combat aircraft at U.S. bases in the region, plus 4 B-52 bombers reported to sitting on the tarmac at Diego Garcia Air Base in the Indian Ocean. Now, I can take my aircraft tracking program right over top of Diego Garcia and zoom in right down to the tarmac. And I haven't done that. I should have done that by now. So I can see these B-52s sitting out there, 4 of them. Now, Reuters, citing some data from ship tracking website Marine Traffic, because you can do the same thing with ships at sea. It's amazing the information that is available on the internet. Not just airplanes in the sky, commercial aircraft, military. Some military stuff is not identifiable. You can see the plane there, but it's not identifiable. You know damn well what it is. You can do the same thing with ships at sea. And I understand you could do the same thing with rail transport. I haven't found out how to do that yet, but I've heard you can. So Reuters, citing, as I said, ship tracking data from the website Marine Traffic, reported earlier that the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz, which has been on a Western Pacific deployment, has left the China Sea and is heading west. Now, the South China Sea and the Persian Gulf is what, probably a third of the diameter of the Earth? Well, I don't know if it's a third or not, maybe 25%. And moving at 20, 25 knots, it's going to take a while to get there, but they'll get there. And the carrier had planned to visit Da Nang City in Vietnam later this week, but 2 sources, including one diplomat, told Reuters that a formal reception slated for June 20th has been called off. They have other things to do, other places to go. One of the sources said that the U.S. Embassy in Hanoi had informed them about the cancellation due to, quote, an emergent operational requirement. So if the Nimitz is headed for Southwest Asia, it will be joining the USS Carl Vinson, which has been there since April. So you've got 4 B-52s at Diego Garcia. You got 35 or 45 K1 or KC-135s on their way there. You've got 70 or 90,000? 90,000 servicemen in the area from northern Iraq, northern Syria, all the way down through, probably on the ground in Israel. For what, some big July 4th celebration party? Then you've got British provocations at the same time taking place in the Baltic Sea. Sergei Narishkin, who's head of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, warns about the possibility of a staged torpedo attack under a Russian flag on a ship in the Baltic Sea. This just came out. And this, he says, is being organized by Ukraine and Britain, and Ukraine has already handed over Soviet Russian-made torpedoes to the British. Some of them are supposed to explode at a safe distance. One is supposed to remain unexploded as proof of the Russia's aggression against Allied traffic in the Baltic Sea. So here's your little Reichstag coming. Another option, he said, is the accidental discovery in the Baltic of Russian-made moored mines allegedly intended for sabotage on international routes. So in a statement issued yesterday, the agency described the growing coordination between Ukraine's security service, the SBU, and its military intelligence with British intelligence, which is said is due to Kyiv's mounting battlefield setbacks and deepening moral exhaustion. So such sabotage operations typically follow a set pattern, the intelligence service said, with Britain planning and coordinating and the Ukrainian operatives carrying out the attack. The report suggested that the same approach was being used in the recent railway sabotage in Russia's Bryansk and Kursk regions and the strikes on Russia's airfields. So this statement from Narishkin, he says, Kyiv has become the perfect executor of vile provocations and terrorist acts for perfidious Albion, which is their name for England. And Narishkin has reportedly warned of possible British provocations, saying that they are well aware of London's hostile covert actions against Russia. All right, now, what else? The United States just canceled the diplomatic meetings with Russia. You know that they've been, every few weeks, there's these diplomats meeting together to improve the diplomatic relationship with Russia. The U.S. canceled it, the planned meeting next week, according to Russia's foreign ministry. Previous meetings this year have been to reestablish normal diplomatic exchanges between the United States and Russia. You would think the two greatest nuclear powers would be having lunch with each other every single day, just to have the back channels open to ward off what seems to be the coming inevitability of the end of the human species. So Maria Zakharova said this: today, the next meeting within the framework of bilateral consultations on eliminating irritants in order to normalize the activities of diplomatic missions of both countries has been canceled at the initiative of American negotiators. We hope that the pause that's taken will not be so long. Well, one such irritant, of course, is the Russian property that the Biden administration has confiscated. And the Russian side is supposed to have access to these properties to inspect the conditions of the facilities and have the property returned. So a day later, Kremlin spokesman Peskov said on the amount of damage that has occurred in the relationship of the two countries and the task that's ahead of both countries, the Augean stables of our relations are too dirty. It'll take a long time to clean them up. And you are familiar, of course, with the story of Hercules in those stables. A great analogy. Well, we are in a situation where it's not yet clear if it's going to lead to a complete escalation of global war, and therefore the annihilation, as I said, of the human species, or if forces of reason can intervene in time before that happens, intervene in time. I can only say it is extremely serious because the degree of madness and incompetence and criminality on both sides of the various parties is so overwhelming that I would really warn against that you would harbor in your heart and mind any sense that this is a limited conflict with Iran and Israel, because there's no guarantee that it is. And obviously, the G7 world leaders, in parentheses, should be G8, are meeting in Canada, and according to Macron, even though Trump left, they're still there. According to Macron, the Middle East and Ukraine will be the top items. And already before, they had said they may not be able to point out or put out a joint communique on the thing, but because they're expected differences between Trump and the rest of the G7, and they know what those differences are. And now Trump isn't there; he's in the White House in the what's the word? The special operations. Oh, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. And all I can imagine is that the Joint Chiefs are there. The new Joint Chief, Dave, I'll think of it here in a second. Half of them are pushing to join Iran, or join Israel against Iran. The other half are saying, no, Mr. President. Iran is no threat to us. Don't do this. What, Mr. President, do you think Russia and China will do to one of their BRICS partners if you unleash hell? So now the Nimitz is apparently underway, as I said, to the Middle East. The U.S. Air Force, as I said, is sending the biggest ever number of tanker airplanes from various U.S. bases over the Atlantic. And this was reported by the Times of Israel. That's where I got this. Referring to flight data in their possession, and they say at a minimum, the KC-135s and the KC-46s, almost 50 of them, are moving in the direction of the Middle East, which is obviously a backup for Israeli fighter jets to fly attacks into Iran. And then there is a parallel, of course, in relationship to this, the ongoing NATO maneuver, Atlantic Trident 25, which starts today in Finland and goes 4 days, for which there would only be the necessity of 6 to 8 refueling tankers. So it's generally estimated that in this little military procedure, Atlantic Trident 25, where they only need 6 to 8 refueling tankers, they didn't need the near 50 that's on its way. So the majority of them must be going somewhere else, maybe to the Middle East. So this is kind of the heightened situation in which both sides, Israel and Iran, continue to pummel each other, where Iran, by the latest report that I've seen, is now flying more and more hypersonic missiles at Israeli targets, and heavier warheads are being deployed with these Iranian missiles, causing more extensive damage to Israeli targets, according to Tasmin, another source. And right now, because of the collateral damage and the innocent bystanders, the non-combatant citizens, I mean, it's a bloody, ugly war, which has the potential of clearly widening at any moment. And there were also coalition forces in Iraq, meaning U.S. forces, shooting down 2 Iranian drones that were headed for Israel. But most of them now are getting through because Iran is following the same pattern they did months ago in the last attack, is they send up all the drones first. There's three prongs to this attack. Number one are the slower drones that are barely flying 100, 150 miles an hour. And they go up and they go high in the arc so that they set off the Iron Dome. And then the Iron Dome uses all the missiles that they have until there's no missiles left and the Iron Dome is done. And we don't have any more of the THAAD and all the other kinds of missiles to give them because we're running out of them for ourselves here in America. And so the first wave is to expose the defensive positions of the IDF and to use up all of the anti-incoming missiles. And then the next round is the faster, heavier ordnance missiles. And then the third round are the hypersonics that you can't stop. And Iran is continuing to send round after round of these hypersonics. Now, the Iranians have informed Qatar and Oman and the mediators there that they will only pursue peace negotiations again once Iran has completed its response to the Israeli strikes. And they're not going to negotiate while they're under attack. And every time Israel sends in another wave, Iran is going to respond with hypersonics, which Israel does not have. Now, Israel seems to be gaining some ground in the air, which still makes me scratch my head, because Iran is in possession of the S-400 anti-missile or anti-aircraft system from the Russians. So there must be more Israeli jets being shot down than are being reported, or there's a lot less S-400 batteries than I thought there were. Because the Pentagon doesn't keep me up to date. Just like you, I have to go digging. But they're not going to talk peace. They're not going to talk ceasefire until Israel stops shooting them. Now, the Iranian foreign minister, Agrachi, said yesterday that the Islamic Republic does not want the war to spread to other countries in that region, and that the Iranian missile strikes at Israel are self-defense and would stop if the Israeli regime would halt its aggression against Iran. And he also said the Persian Gulf is a very sensitive, complex region. Any military development there could not involve just that little region, but the entire world. And that Iran does not want to spread the conflict. Now, why does the big argument, especially from Netanyahu, is that they've got to stop Israel from their nuclear development. Now, thanks to Paul Jensen, he sent me this little chart from Netanyahu warning of Iranian nuclear missile or nuclear fusion material development for a nuclear bomb. 1992, 33 years ago, Netanyahu said, Iran is 3 to 5 years from nuclear capability. Then a year later, he said, Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons close to compatibility. Then 2 years later, Iran is 3 to 5 years from nuclear capability, which he had said 3 years earlier. Then in 1996, he said, Iran's nuclear acquisition could be catastrophic. Deadline extremely close, 1996. 2003, Netanyahu said, Iran's nuclear program is a global threat. 2004, Iran aggressively pursuing nuclear weapons. 2005, Iran's nuclear ambitions must be stopped. 2006, Iran could have a nuclear bomb soon. 2007, Iran racing to develop nuclear weapons. 2008, Iran's nuclear program nearing completion. 2009, Iran is 1 to 2 years from nuclear capability. 2010, Iran could produce a bomb within a year. And the list goes on and on and on and on. Last year, Iran dangerously close to nuclear bomb. And this year, Iran is days away from enriching uranium for a bomb. And you know why he gets away with saying stuff like that? Because people have a very short memory, and most of them don't pay attention to what's going on. And most Americans are lucky to have a 2-week memory because of all the distractions, all the sports, all the evening prime TV shows, all the celebrations. And we're going to come into the summer of celebrations here in Utah with Draper Days and South Jordan Days and Strawberry Days down in American Fork and all the different days. And those things are good. I'm glad we have them. But thinking that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, I think it's obviously important to analyze almost on an hourly basis how this conflict spreads. I think one should keep in mind that this is, I believe, to a large degree on autopilot, because Vanessa Beeley and the writer Brian Berletic have pointed out in a paper at Brookings Institution that all of what is happening right now, all of it is part of a 2009 policy paper which planned out in great detail the present escalation between Israel and Iran. And there was this paper with the title, Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Toward Iran. Just got to love the way they title these papers. And Brookings Institution is obviously a think tank which has massive U.S. government and military funding, as well as other large financier interests from the West. And they had this in 2009. What's that? That's 26 or 16 years ago. This 170-page study in which they go through 7 major scenarios how to overthrow the current Iranian government. Now, why do they want to do this? And you see where Netanyahu is sending messages to the Iranian population. Now's the time to overthrow your dictatorial government. Now's the time to throw out the supreme leader. And of course, there are millions of Iranians that would have their July 4th celebration the minute the supreme leader was gone. But that, of course, is not Netanyahu's real intent. The idea that if they can overthrow this last remaining obstacle to Israeli Middle East hegemony through the entire Levant, through the whole Eretz Israel collective geographical borders, and they have control of Iran, because there'll be puppet leaders in there under Israeli control, and control of Iranian oil for the next several decades, then Israel will have gained what Israel has wanted to gain. And so there are chapters in this paper that go into how to create unrest in Iran, regime change. They go through these options, and if you compared to what happened in 2009, it's clear that each and every one of these options has either been tried or tried several times, or is in the process of being implemented even now. So there was no change in this policy in this respect, either from Obama, who made this the so-called JCPOA deal, nor with Trump, who canceled unilaterally the JCPOA deal, which is part of the scenario of the Brookings Institution. To then say that such a unilateral cancellation would be the pretext for more strikes and the things that are going on in Iran. This is really satanic. I don't know how else to describe this, because it's noted in the report. Quote, of course, it would be difficult for the United States to goad Iran into such a provocation without the rest of the world recognizing this game, which would then undermine it. So what they're really saying is this. The paper is admitting that the U.S. seeks war with Iran, but wants to convince the world that it's Iran that's provoking it. So this is exactly what you see playing out that answers the question, what Israel is doing is completely against any international law, and the so-called preventive attack does not even apply because there was no attack in the wings on the side of Iran against Israel. So even that paper, which is not exactly a truth-seeking paper, I mean, they have to admit this was a completely illegal operation by Israel back on June 1st when they initiated the attack against Iran. And the reality, you know, the results so far, given the fact that Trump had engaged in the pretense that he was backing a diplomatic solution involving Iran, Oman, Qatar, that the U.S. was involved in this, while at the same time, at the minimum, he knew that it's not clear if he even tried to stop it. I mean, it doesn't look like it. Or condoning it, which is also an option. But in any case, the fact that he created the impression that he was favoring a diplomatic solution while at the same time this attack was being carried out with U.S. support, refueling Israeli jets. I am afraid this has done an additional, absolutely devastating damage to the credibility of President Trump and of the collective West. And on top of what he condones going on in Gaza to get rid of those people so he can build his Riviera. I think this is just adding a major strain to the whole moral standing of the West, which is now completely discredited in the eyes of the majority of the world. It's not just the Russian Federation that no longer trusts anything that comes out of Washington. The rest of the world is joining that caravan. And I know I'm probably stepping on a lot of toes, but I really hoped and prayed that Trump and his campaigning to immediately stop the wars and not start any new wars was telling the truth. But that does not seem to be the case. So I think, what I'm trying to do, instead of just sitting around waiting for a catastrophe to unfold, is I'm going to try to upscale and do better podcasts, shorter podcasts that hit various crucial, prescient points. As I said, my webmaster is on his way, or not on his way, but he will be here this weekend. So I can take my room that I've been doing painting in, and I've got two paintings, 3 by 4, 3 foot by 4 foot paintings. I'm going to put on the wall of my clinic. What I've been wanting to do for 20 years now, and turn that into a podcast room. So following, demanding this proposal made by the Indian people, or the Indian diplomat M.K. Bradu Kumar, and supported by other people like the Russian proposal to media, Putin's proposal offering that Russia could mediate between Iran, the United States, and Israel. A similar proposal, interesting enough, comes from another one of my heroes, Colonel McGregor, who's basically calling, he first says that Israel succeeded to surprise Iran. There's no issue about it. Iran didn't see this coming. Even with Iranian intelligence located inside of Israel, Iran didn't see this attack coming. And one of the reasons why they didn't is because they were undergoing diplomatic relations to calm down the issue between Iran and Israel. And so, but then on the other side, this Pearl Harbor moment, as they're calling it, by getting its forces together in just a few hours. And then remember, our Pearl Harbor, we got even the following summer at Midway. But Iran didn't take that long to respond to the Pearl Harbor attack on them. And then you've got this so-called Iron Dome of Israel not protecting Israel from damage, and obviously the Israeli regular forces has failed. So that gives the fact that Iran has the support of Russia, China, India, and the vast majority of the Muslim world, which are all supplying Iran with weapons and technical support. And that's already underway. Therefore, I think it'd be time for some realistic analysis here. And given the fact that the U.S. is so highly indebted, and Trump has promised to end all wars, that he is now calling also for a Middle East conference. And Trump says that a wide alliances of states, including the United States, Russia, China, India, Brazil, should immediately call for a peace conference for the Middle East to settle this conflict. And then naturally the things which have been postponed, namely the two-state solution for Palestine, and more importantly than anything else, ending the genocide against these defenseless Palestinians, would have to be a part of such a peace conference. Now, the ominous background, well, we're going to be going to break here in a couple of minutes. I'll continue to talk to the streamers. I hope that's not condescending to streamers. I'm a streamer. I watch other streams. Where do you think all this stuff comes from? I'm not any smarter than the rest of you. I just spend a lot of time collating and reading and following the paths of intelligence that make sense to me. But this ominous background that is developing behind us, in front of us, is obviously that the role of the British is absolutely visible here. And this goes back to the Balfour Declaration. This goes back to the very reason why Israel wanted, or England wanted the Israeli creation in the first place, was to cause the very things that have been going on there for the last 70 years. So that the British Empire can gain control of that oil. And not just the oil, but the strategic location between Europe and Asia without having to go through the Urals. So the British, or the media is now reporting, saying, I wanted to say this. Those of you who are listening on the radio, I don't think you can listen on the radio. I think the radio broadcast is really bad. But if you go to youtube.com/Global Affairs Unfiltered, you can see the live version of this. I know a lot of you are listening on the stream or on the internet. Apparently that's working. But we're going to go to break here in a minute, and when we do, I'll continue with the stream. But the media is saying that the similarities to the Ukrainian attack on the Russian bomber fleet, remember that back in the Black Sea, the Wall Street Journal basically gives details which makes clear the MO was exactly the same when with drones being smuggled into the Ukraine, but also into Iran for months and months at a time ahead of their deployment. And so in the case of Iran, there were hundreds of drones smuggled into Iran in suitcases, trucks, container ships, which were then deployed from previously established platforms and so forth. And that in all probability was not possible without data transmission of all kinds of other tactical support from the West. And in this case, likely the British Secret Services. Should also be noted, again, which just makes the case very clear, that the U.S. National Intelligence has at as late as February, early March, for the umpteenth time, and from no less than Tulsi Gabbard herself, that Iran is not preparing to develop a weapon. And that there's still the fatwa that came out of Khomeini for the religious reasons. Iran does not want to get into nuclear weapons. All right. And basically that is now in jeopardy because it could very well be that they will try to have a nuclear weapon, or several of them fairly soon, that we've been told by good intelligence they can do in as little as 2 weeks. And why would they finally do it? Because Israel is bombing them. That's my whole point here. There's also unconfirmed reports that even a refueling plane of the German army was part of this, which would be a very idiotic thing. And there's an estimate by Rainier Rupp that I've quoted from many times that in the intermediate term, or the little bit prolonged short term, that Israel can be defeated. Because he says the sending of only 10 Iranian hypersonic missiles per day, accompanied by dozens of drones, which after a short while will not have to fear any resistance from the Israeli Air Force or air defense, would be enough to defeat Israel, given the fact that the U.S., NATO, European Union military complex is massively overextended, and that they could not even produce the necessary number of drones and missiles for the Ukraine, and that they cannot revamp their production capacity out of the blue, and also the Iron Dome is not functioning. So he thinks that it doesn't look very good for Israel. However, he does not mention the fact that Netanyahu is fighting for his own political survival to stay out of prison, who just might use a nuclear bomb for that reason. So for a last 24-hour period with no news, I was able to make up some stuff here for you. And so that's the situation. And now in the meantime, Russia has announced that they have successfully tested another new weapon system, namely an air defense laser, which can knock down drones. And that is part of the arms race which is going on internationally. And of course, there is good evidence over the last few years the United States has the same thing. In fact, there are not necessarily destroyers, but, and I don't know what the class name is for certain ships in the U.S. Navy that are equipped with these lasers. It's not talked about too much, which makes me think it doesn't work that well. Because usually when the U.S. comes up with some newfangled thing that strikes heart or fear in the heart of our enemies, that they talk about it, and it's displayed at air shows or defense when a military-industrial complex has a backlog of unsold material. Then they have a big weapons demonstration that clears out the stock. I haven't heard too much about the ground-to-air laser systems. And of course, there's the fact that there are apparently satellites in orbit who have these laser systems. And rockets are being launched all the time from SpaceX. This is where a lot of Elon's revenue is coming from, sending these lasers into orbit. So there's, as I used to say on my daily program back before 2015, I was off the air from 2015 to 2018 doing podcasts. But before 2015, I was always making the comment, and I can't remember who it was that said it first. I just stole it from him. No matter how bad you think things are, it's 10 times worse. No matter how bad you think an impending war with Iran and the United States, when Trump finally says, send in the bombers, send in the clowns, it's worse than that. And what they're talking about in the White House in the Situation Room, I think transcends that by quite a bit. So Erdogan was having a phone discussion with Trump yesterday, urging that diplomacy is the only viable path to resolve the spiraling conflict between Iran and Israel, warning of an impending catastrophe, because if nukes are involved, and the number I'm seeing now that Israel has anywhere from 200 to 500 nukes, I thought it was just 200. And if Israel used a nuke against Iran, oh my goodness. Oh. Because with Iran sending in 10 Iranian hypersonic missiles a day, and these things are very precise in their targeting, and they're hitting communication centers, and they're hitting defense centers, and they're hitting airports. And then dozens of drones coming in, exhausting the very last piece of Israeli air defense. And then with Iran's threats to utterly destroy Israel. I mean, just think about that. You think about where Israel is right now, and then suddenly the President of the United States leaves the G7, which was the G8 till they threw out the Russian outfit, meeting in the Situation Room with, as President Trump was describing at Camp David, lots and lots of admirals and generals. This is no laughing matter, Jack. Come on. This is serious stuff. This is getting more serious because Iran has decided to destroy Israel and the catastrophe that would be involved with that. Now, if Israel were to set off a nuke, where's that fallout going to go? Have you watched the weather? I know you've probably canceled your subscription to Middle Eastern Meteorological Review. But the weather patterns are swirling, well, something is playing at K-Talk and I'm not going to talk over it. Swirling air patterns in a certain circular design that would carry nuclear fallout from Iran over to Afghanistan and Pakistan, parts of India, as well as back underneath towards Jordan and Israel and Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and Turkey, which is why Erdogan is so upset about this, because fallout could land in Turkey. So there are those who are trying to diffuse this conflict. And there are those who are absolutely of a war mindset. And that is, among others, von der Leyen, who, before the G7 summit, said that Iran is the main reason for the regional instability, that she telephoned Netanyahu and then put on X a note about their discussion saying, "I've just discussed with Prime Minister Netanyahu. We are following the developments in the Middle East with great concern. I have reinforced our engagement for peace, stability, and diplomatic efforts for de-escalation. In this context, I underlined that Israel has the right for self-defense, and Iran is the main reason for the regional instability." I mean, that is really ludicrous. I mean, that's insulting. Von der Leyen, I don't know how she got back into the position she's in, but that is absolutely insulting and ludicrous. I mean, what does this woman think? How the whole world is going to read her remarks? And I mean, she's just, right now, there are grave diggers for Europe who are digging the nuclear graves, and she's one of them, by making a remark like that, because the whole world is going to realize what a liar she is. And I will stop it there. There's another word I would use to describe her, but children are listening. Now, what I want you to ponder and think about is that when you hear about the attacks of Israel to Iran, very precise surgical strikes on certain defense areas and communication areas for their nuclear power plants, and hopefully they're not stupid enough to hit a power plant and have a Chernobyl experience whose radiation will go way out. Look where Tehran is and Natanz. I mean, you know, north central to the northern parts of Iran, just below the Caspian, and all the other countries that would be involved with this. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to create this situation so that hopefully, not that you've got to see things the way I see them, but I see the president today, coming back early from G7 in the Situation Room with lots and lots of generals and admirals and joint chiefs and security people and intelligence people, and Tulsi Gabbard is there. And you think she's keeping her mouth shut about how Iran has no nuclear development program? When the war hawks and that Mark Levin, I'm ready to throw him out the window. What a war hawk. And if he and Lindsey Graham were in the room, I'd grab them both by the ears and throw them out. Then over on the other side of the world, you have Iran sending, I know I'm repeating myself, but I really want you to understand what's going on here. Iran is sending in 10 hypersonic missiles a day into Israel. You can't stop these things. And they're carrying heavier loads. So while Israel's attacks have been surgical in communication areas and defense areas and military airports and stuff, and have selectively removed certain personalities from the Iranian government, not the least of which was the fellow who is the leader of the diplomatic mission to bring this war to an end. So what does that tell you about Israel? Israel specifically targeted this man who's the leader of the delegation to bring this to an end. So how long is President Trump going to sit there in the Situation Room before he finally pushes the button? Anyway, that's the situation. All I can say is, you know, McGregor's idea, and I went through that yesterday, that there must be an immediate peace conference. An immediate peace conference. And you know that's what Erdogan was telling Trump yesterday. And even Putin said, listen, as soon as that attack happened, Putin talked to Netanyahu and he talked to Khomeini and said, listen, we can't sit by and let the ultimate destruction take place without being drawn into this ourselves. Unfortunately, this is not the only crisis point. I think the United States is really in some major domestic escalation, which centers around Trump's efforts to deport these so-called illegal aliens. I mean, on Saturday, there were these major demonstrations in LA that you know about where police were using tear gas and rubber bullets. There were 5 million people joining in these anti-Trump rallies across the United States. They had the No Kings slogans, referring to Trump's birthday celebration with a military parade in Washington, which, by the by, I thought was beautiful, marking the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. And the No Kings organizers called for a nationwide day of defiance, rejecting authoritarianism, billionaire-first politics, and the militarization of our democracy. And there were demonstrations in more than 1,500 cities across all the 50 states, including our own beloved Salt Lake City. Now, obviously, this is a very mixed bag of what's going on regarding these demonstrations in our country. Because you have some legitimate protesters against ripping families apart that have been living in the U.S. for 15 years or so. And then also the provocateurs who are stirring this up. And this obviously is not helped by the fact that Trump has ordered the largest mass deportation in history. And that is, unfortunately, also the policy of Silicon Valley. It's the policy of Elon Musk. It's the policy of Peter Thiel, a Palantir, who there are those who allege owns Vice President Vance. And the role of this whole billionaire, I mean, obviously these demonstrators are sensing something, and I think it's important that we, you know, think about this. I mean, how did they get so many millions of Americans involved in this already? And this mass surveillance apparatus now, was this, there are those who are saying this was egged on to test Palantir's mass surveillance of the American public out in the public space. And we know that the surveillance apparatus that was created by Palantir is being used by the police, it's being used by ICE, It's being used by the military, not only in our country, but in a lot of European countries. In the meantime, that's the big issue, and the deep state obviously has evolved and mushroomed into integrating these digital technologies in a very major way, and they're privatized. They're not under the control of any elected official whatsoever. Now that ought to wake you up in the night tonight a couple times. The most massive surveillance of American people, public, we've ever had is not under the control of any elected officials. And then likewise in Germany, there's this certain amount of resistance in other places in Europe as well. In Germany in particular, the so-called peace manifesto of the 100 SPDs, which is the controlling party, is quite a freak out. Pistorius said it's necessary. I mean, he's the... Well, there's something else going on at K-Talk. I'm going to bleep that out. Oh, maybe somebody's trying to call in. I have no control of that. I'm sorry. I have no control of what's going on at K-Talk. K-Talk has more control of me than I have of K-Talk. Anyway, the young socialists, the Jusos, J-U-S-O-S, the Jusos, young socialists in Germany are absolutely... There's this, I don't want to take the time to get into it. I got these other things I want to talk about. There is, in our government, in our two houses, in the executive branch, thank you for that message. In the executive branch, they're war hawks. The majority of them are war hawks. The majority of them are owned by the Israeli lobby. As was pointed out by Thomas Massey, that he's the only member of the House, and of course he was referring to the Senate as well, that does not have a member of AIPAC as a part of their staff. What does that tell you? Every single member of the Senate, every single member of the House, except for Thomas Massey, he wouldn't allow it, has a member of the Israeli lobby on their staff. Now in Germany, they're splitting in several pieces. I wanted to bring up Germany because Germany has been suffering under this for some time because of their Holocaust guilt, and now they're breaking away from that. Now there's other major demonstrations in Europe as well. There was a Bilderberger meeting in Stockholm where there were 1,000 people, and naturally the new president of the German parliament participated in the Bilderberger meeting, and so there were 155,000 people demonstrating against this. In Brussels, there was 100,000 people. In Berlin, 3,000 people, because they've had it. So while we have our people in the street here protesting no kings, and I made this comment at the beginning of the first hour, I'm going to repeat myself. This is how you get a king. When you get a no kings, and I'm not saying this no kings demonstration that went on there for several days, including Salt Lake, didn't have moral, justifiable reasons to take place. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when you get this many people, this is where the Democratic move above a Republican base begins to take place. And this is how you end up with a king, with this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad one way or the other. All I'm saying is kings are born out of this. As I said in the first hour, King Stalin, King Hitler, King Mussolini. Now, the SIPRI, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, is meanwhile warning that the new arms race is increasing the danger of nuclear war, saying that there are currently more than 12,200 nuclear warheads globally. And the number is increasing. Because when old nuclear weapons are being put out of business, more new ones are being added. So the number of operational warheads and bombs is increasing. And they're saying this is adding to the danger, and increasingly, Karen Niesel, who's the former foreign minister of Austria, blasts the remilitarization of Europe because of Ursula von der Leyen, that I was referring to earlier as the consummate beast, saying there's no legitimate reason for her to increase the control of EU Commission over all those areas. The only more interesting news is, interestingly enough, there's discussion in Russia right now of a high-speed railway connection between Moscow and St. Petersburg. So in the midst of their special military operation going on in the Ukraine, in the midst of their maybe having to come in behind the back door to help Iran if the United States gets involved in the attacks on Iran, they're still hyping up the building of a hypersonic railway. I don't think it's hypersonic. I think it's more like high-speed railway between St. Petersburg and Moscow. So we're in an extremely dangerous moment, mainly because the Western, or many of the Western establishments, are completely oblivious to reality, just completely oblivious, and they're dream dancing in the clouds, thinking about their positions, maintaining their privileges, totally intended to not enter into a dialogue with the global majority to talk this down and establish world peace. So I think that while things look really bad, there is definitely hope on the horizon, and that it isn't all bad. I thought the comments of Diane Sayre regarding the No Kings rallies was really good. She's the current president of the LaRouche organization, and has run for Senate against, what's his name in New York? Anyway, this No Kings rallies that took place, you know how many cities? You know how many cities had official No Kings rallies? 1,000. Of course, in protest of President Trump. And Sarah was pointing to the dangerous political climate, the dubious intentions of those sponsoring the demonstrations, and the danger that Americans are being played because they aren't currently thinking in big enough terms required to shift the U.S. and the world into a new paradigm of peace and development. Most Americans, and she didn't say this, these are my words, operate from a knee-jerk reaction position. You kick me, I kick you. Rather than me waiting for a second, why did you kick me? What am I doing that would make you want to kick me? Am I doing something here that's stirring up this situation between us that you feel the need to be aggressive against me? Can't we just sit down over a glass of nice ice cold raw milk and a couple of peanut butter cookies fresh out of the oven and talk about why you needed to kick me? Oh, excuse me, I don't have my water here. But no, Americans don't think like that. You kick me, I'm going to kick you. And these were well-organized demonstrations. We know that. Oh, excuse me. But we're in a very dangerous situation inside the United States, as evidenced by the assassination. I think I know what I can do here. There we go. Yeah, I think that might stop the beeping. Excuse me. When you have this assassination that took place of this Minnesota lawmaker that just occurred, that people who participate, I mean, there are rallies, as I said, these are rallies to have kings and to have war. And these explicit threats to assassinate President Trump are made at these demonstrations with the mafia code number 8647 displayed on signs. I saw some of those. I scan the signs as much as possible through television coverage or stream coverage or whatever else, because I'm looking for all of the things that don't say the same thing. I'm looking for the things that have maybe one or two representations. And 8647, you know what that means? That's an assassination, a call to assassinate President Trump. I think this is a very dangerous situation that's emerging, because the deployment of this is on a much higher level than just a bunch of people stirred up about no kings in America. And I don't think, I'm afraid most Americans are not thinking big enough. I know you are. But they don't have a real sense of the purpose of our republic. So they don't realize how we're being played. And they're being sucked into these divisive actions that are going to lead to much worse conditions. Now, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted on X the other night. She said everyone is finding out who the real America First, MAGA, and who were fake, and just said it because it was popular. Unfortunately, the list of fakes are becoming quite long and exposing themselves quite quickly, because anyone slobbering for the U.S. to become fully involved in the Israeli-Iran war is not America First MAGA. I mean, wishing for the murder of innocent people is disgusting. And we're sick and tired of foreign wars, all of them, and this one is going to quickly engulf the Middle East and BRICS and NATO as countries are required to take a side. Now, the real America First, the MAGA, wants world peace for all people and doesn't want our military killed. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene said, real America wants world peace doesn't want our military killed and forever injured physically and mentally. We love our U.S. military. We love them helping to secure our borders and our cities for the defense of our people and our country. They are our friends, spouses, cousins, nieces, nephews, sisters, brothers, sons, daughters. We've spent trillions in the Middle East. We have dealt with the aftermath of death, blown apart bodies, never-ending suicides, and disabling PTSD. All because they told us propaganda as to why we must sacrifice our own to defend some other country's border against some other country's border. I don't want to see Israel bombed or Iran bombed or Gaza bombed. I don't want to see Ukraine bombed or Russia bombed. And this is Marjorie Taylor Greene. And we do not want to be involved or required to pay for any one of these things. We are 36 trillion in debt and have mountains of our own problems. We have giant planks sticking out of our own eyes while we complain about the splinters in somebody else's. Every country involved all over the world can be happy, successful, and rich if we all work together and seek peace and prosperity. Taking this position is not anti-Semitic. It's rational, sane, and loving toward all people. Taking this position of peace and prosperity for all is not isolationism. It leads to great trade deals and great economies that help all people. It's what many Americans voted for in 2024. This is how we make America great again. Thank you, Congresswoman Greene. I couldn't agree with you more. Now, I got a question for you. There were 11 more mass shootings in the United States over this weekend, resulting in 13 deaths and another 49 casualties. And mass shootings are defined as when 4 or more individuals are hit, not including the shooter. 11 such shootings in 48 hours, or one every 4.4 hours, makes it a busy weekend, even by U.S. standards. In the first 5 months, this is your question. In the first 5 months through the end of May, the United States had a little over one mass shooting every how long period of time? From January 1st to May 31st, there was a mass shooting in America every what? And a mass shooting is 4 people or more, not including the shooter. There was over one mass shooting per day in America. And last weekend, during the No Kings, the rate was 5 times higher than that. And of course, Salt Lake City made the list this weekend, though it wasn't for much publicized shootings at the No Kings event. Only 2 people were there when this peacekeeper for the event shot a man with an AR-15 style rifle next to the demonstration. I talked about this yesterday. You know a lot about it yourself. Arturo Gamboa, 24, dressed in black, wearing a mask, was ordered by 2 members of the peacekeeping team to drop his rifle. But he ran into the crowd. A peacekeeper fired 3 shots, wounding Gamboa and a bystander, Arthur Folasa Alu, who died that evening in the hospital. Salt Lake City police said this: detectives have developed a probable cause that Gamboa acted under circumstances that showed a depraved indifference to human life, knowingly engaged in conduct that created a grave risk for death, ultimately caused the death of an innocent community member. But last night, bullets were flying all over the Westfest Festival, hitting 5 people. A 16-year-old suspect allegedly opened fire during a fight between 2 groups, with 2 injured, 3 killed, including an 8-month-old baby. You've already seen that in the news. So, the bottom line of all of that, there has been more than 1 mass shooting per day from January 1st to May 31st. A mass shooting defined as 4 people or more, not including the shooter. All right, another one of my heroes, Dennis Kucinich, former Ohio congressman, U.S. presidential candidate, in his Substack article, that's where this is coming from, yesterday's date, his article ends this way: the attack on Iran is a clear demonstration of Israel's contempt for America. Mr. Netanyahu's end game is not the security of his people. It is to hold together a coalition of sanguinary racists to avoid his own imprisonment. The U.S. must reassess its close relationship to Israel. Israel's preemptive actions jeopardize Iran and attempt to draw America into an ever unnecessary escalation of global magnitude. America is Israel's best friend, but friends don't let friends commit genocide. Friends don't drag friends into war. Friends do not risk the security of the world for narrow political gains. The President of the United States must intervene to put America's interests first. The safety and well-being of the people of the United States is not and never has been a concern of Mr. Netanyahu, but it must be that of the President of the United States. Tame the rising lion before it eats us. All right, exchange of dead. No, I don't want to talk about that. I've got a couple of more things here that I thought This is a great article head, Gaza, more dangerous to get food or not get food? Because every time the food shows up, the bullets fly. When the food doesn't show up, then hunger flies. Which one's better? To die of hunger or die of bullets because you finally got some answer to your hunger? There's another Freedom Flotilla that's on its way to Gaza from Malaysia. 1,000 ships. 1,000 ships are underway to dispatch help to Gaza. I wonder if the Israeli Navy is prepared to sink 1,000 ships. Ha. At the click of a button. All right. Now, I was reading through Paul Roberts' article the other day, and he had something very interesting. This may be able to take us to the top of the hour. Have you noticed how many wars there are without being declared? Israel launches a military attack on Iran, and Iran retaliates, but there's no declaration of war. Israel, of course, is going to attack again, if not already as I'm speaking. And Iran will again respond by retaliating with more hypersonic missiles. But neither country is at war. Russia has been in conflict with Ukraine since February of 2022, but it's a special military operation, not a war. Russia's strategic triad was attacked. Putin brushed it off as a terrorist action, not an act of war. After a couple of years of being bombed to dust, Gaza's population, of course, is now being starved to death, intentionally. But it's just a matter of clearing the area so that a resort can be built. Libya and its leadership were destroyed. Iraq and its leadership were destroyed. Syria and its leadership were destroyed, but it wasn't wars, just the imposition of democracy. Saudi Arabia invaded Yemen, but war was not declared. Israel's attacks on Lebanon and Hezbollah were merely anti-terrorist operations, not war. War is everywhere, but the reality cannot be acknowledged. We don't talk in terms of war. And the most serious event of all is not even being acknowledged. Someone in the West gave the green light for an attack on Russia's nuclear triad, despite Russia's war doctrine requires a strategic response to such an attack. And I don't think the response has happened yet. Oh, there's been increase in drone stuff, and there's increased missiles into Kyiv and other areas as the Russian army continues to move kilometers every day forward towards the Dnieper and the Dnieper Provost. Once they get there, there won't be much left. And Putin sidestepped that issue by declaring the attack to be terrorist, not an act of war. Would we have been so gracious had part of our nuclear triad, let's say Barksdale, if the B-2 sitting there at Barksdale had been hit by a drone, even from the drug cartel across the Rio Grande, and a drone made it through and hit a B-2 and totally disabled a B-2 bomber? Would President Trump have been so quick to say, oh, it's just those terrorists? Or would he have declared that an act of war? He's already declared the cartel to be terrorist organizations, which, according to our terrorist doctrine, allows us the right to go over there and bomb the hell out of them wherever we can find them. Mexico's not going to be too happy about that. So whoever gave the green light for that attack that could have initiated nuclear war between Russia and the West still hasn't been identified or held accountable for the risk of life he subjected on the earth. And there's zero interest in discovering how the West green-lighted this attack that under Russian war doctrine should have initiated nuclear war. You don't attack nuclear bombers without expecting a nuke being lobbed in your direction. Putin seems to pretend it didn't happen. And Washington is not making any attempt to find out who or how the U.S. could have thrown us into nuclear war here a few weeks ago. Now, President Trump says he didn't know of the planned attack on Russia's strategic triad, which should scare Trump to death. If it's true, if he's not lying, but he seems uninterested in who it was that would have initiated nuclear war with Russia had Putin not flinched. And it was in process and planning for a year and a half. How could he not know? And how is it that the American people, the people of Europe, the Russians, the Chinese, the rest of the world, can be content that it is not in the hands of President Trump whether a strike on Russia could have resulted in nuclear war? I mean, how is it that some outside third party had the initiative? Now, what's going to be the next reckless provocation? At what point is Putin going to finally recognize reality and be forced to respond? I mean, the entire media, the governments, security agencies of the world should be focused on identifying and preventing a third party from initiating nuclear conflict between two major nuclear powers. Instead, it's not being discussed, it's not being talked about. And despite his boasts, Trump has done nothing to achieve peace. He could have easily forestalled Israeli attacks on Iran by agreeing to an inspection to certify the extent of Iran's enrichment of uranium. It wasn't just that Tulsi Gabbard said, the best of all the intelligence we have, Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. She said that in March. And not only that, the Iranian engineers said, come and take a look. They're still part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Come and take a look. And the West didn't. Putin says the Ukraine negotiations have to address the central issue. Does anyone in Washington understand that the central issue is NATO on Russia's borders? There are U.S. missile bases in Poland and Romania, both of which are just a few hundred miles from Moscow. These missiles can be loaded with conventional or nuclear warheads. This happens to be an existential problem for Russia, just as were the Soviet missile bases in Cuba for the United States. Now, President Trump can diffuse this entire issue by removing U.S. missile bases on Russia's borders and rolling NATO back to the 1997 borders. Excuse me. Trump could diffuse the situation in the Middle East by simply announcing the U.S. policy is to no longer support any Israeli aggression. And Trump could stop trying to pick a fight with China. Now, in your deepest moments of self-examination and monitoring your own proclivities and understanding of world affairs, especially with Russia, let me ask you this question. What is Russia doing to us? Here in America, kids are out of school. Families are off to Disneyland. I know because I take care of them before they go, and I definitely take care of them when they get back. The parks are filling up. The places you reserved for camping on the weekends is filling up. if not already filled. Snow is rapidly melting up in the mountains that will allow greater access to the Uintas. City celebrations are beginning July 4th, a couple of weeks away, less than 3 weeks away. In the midst of all of that, what is Russia doing to us? What is Russia doing that is threatening any of that? Nothing. What is Iran doing to the United States, despite their death to America stuff? And that's only a portion of the country. The majority of the country wants to be friends with the United States. And despite the fatwa from the supreme leader that any attempt to build a nuclear weapon would be in violation of Islamic belief, and his orders to the Iranian government, do not build a nuclear weapon. And if I was an Iranian working in the nuclear development area of the Iranian government, and someone who had the power that the supreme leader has telling me not to build a nuclear weapon, I probably wouldn't build it. So what is Iran doing to the United States? Nothing. What is China doing to the United States? Yes, I know the intellectual property stuff. And yes, I know the trade imbalances. I'm not talking about that. What is China doing that threatens you here in America? Nothing. How did these three countries, Russia, Iran, and China, that are not hostile toward the West at all, get turned into enemies whose subjugation is worth a nuclear war? Well, this is a massive failure of Western foreign policy. Where there is no vision, the people are lost, as the Old Testament says. What are they doing? What are these three countries doing that's worth against us here in America, that is worth risking nuclear war? Now, the most immediate, with Iran and Israel at war, although they're not using that word specifically, and with us, and I can only imagine what is going on in the Situation Room in the White House, deciding when and where they're going to get involved in this war, which of course means we'll be spending the foreseeable future getting slapped up both sides of the face with lies from the most powerful people in the world, which is another reason why I do this show, to cut through that. The most immediate, obvious situation is that the Netanyahu promoted narrative that Israel initiated this conflict because Iran was on the brink of developing a nuclear weapon, which we know is absolutely false. And with absolutely no self-consciousness or sense of irony, the Israeli Prime Minister followed the attacks with a statement accusing Iran of genocidal rhetoric, which it is backed up with a program to develop nuclear weapons. Israel, as we know, has an unacknowledged nuclear arsenal, not nuclear weapons, but a nuclear arsenal, and its leaders are presently committing genocide in Gaza while spouting genocidal rhetoric that would happen as the use of these nuclear weapons. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time, Netanyahu keeps claiming over and over. He said it could be a year. It could be within a few months. It could be less than a year. There is clear and present danger to Israel's very survival. And if you were listening earlier in the program, I went through a list of about 20 times since 2002, 1992, where Netanyahu has been warning that Iran is a year or two at the most away from nuclear weapons. Now, the Western political, the media class have been dutifully promoting this line and uncritically parroting Israel's claim that its unprovoked attack on Iran was preemptive. But there's absolutely no evidence that any of that is true. And Benjamin Netanyahu has spent literally decades falsely claiming that Iran was a year or two away from developing a nuke, to repeat myself, only to have the calendar prove him wrong with the passage of time over and over again. And then just a few weeks ago, our U.S. intelligence chief, Tulsi Gabbard, said this: "The intelligence community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. And as journalist Seamus Malakavazali, I hope I said that right, recently noted on X, one of the strongest arguments that Iran has not reversed its decision to refrain from obtaining nuclear weapons is that the nuclear scientists have been publicly expressing frustration about the fact that their government won't allow them to construct a nuke. They want to build a nuke. Iran's nuclear scientists want to build a nuke, but Tehran won't let them." Now, Hegseth just recently said this: Iran is moving their way towards something that looks like a nuclear weapon. And the 2025 annual threat assessment of the U.S. intelligence community, we continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. Now, how do you make any sense out of that? That's why I often quote Mark Twain's statement, if you don't follow the evening news, you're uninformed. If you do follow the news, you're misinformed. Hence this radio show. So Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has helped to pave the way for Netanyahu's claims this past Wednesday, just a week ago, when he told the Senate that there have been plenty of indications Iran is moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon. What kind of a comment is that? Well, they're making something that kind of looks like it might be a nuclear weapon. So as soon as Hegseth said that, then other warmongers like Tom Cotton, who said that Hegseth had confirmed that Iran's terrorist regime is actively working towards a nuclear weapon. That's what Cotton said right after Hegseth. Well, it looks like it might be a nuclear weapon. And Cotton said Hegseth confirmed it. And then Cotton's claim regarding what Hegseth said was picked up by the war pundit, the chief warmonger in charge, Mark Levin, who has been personally lobbying Trump to greenlight an attack on Iran, sarcastically quipping on X, said this: "So Secretary of Defense Hegseth must be lying too. Everyone's lying except the isolationists, the Koch heads, K-O-C-H, Koch heads, Koch brothers, Islamists, Chatworths, Katarlson, and their media propagandists." Of course he's being facetious. But what did Hegseth actually said? He didn't say Iran is building a nuclear weapon. He said there have been plenty of indications that Iran has been moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon. Now, if the U.S. had intelligence that Iran was building a nuke, Hegseth would have just said so, despite the contrary comments a few months earlier by Tulsi Gabbard. But instead, he performs these little freakish verbal gymnastics stunt, muttering about indications of something that might kind of sort of look like a nuclear weapon, which then his fellow go bomb the hell out of Iran warhawks, then falsely took and ran with positive assertion that Iran was in fact building a nuke. There's other lies, of course, being circulated to help the market this war as well. As Moon of Alabama, and that's another good place to get information, said that the Washington Post's odious war propagandist David Ignatius is pushing the narrative that Iran has been cultivating a relationship with de facto al-Qaeda leader Saif al-Adel. The lie that Saddam Hussein was in league with al-Qaeda was used 2 decades ago, if you remember, to sell the invasion of Iraq. And at the same time, the Trumpian pundits are currently circulating the narrative that the United States is full of Iranian sleeper cells who could activate at any moment and begin attacking Americans. And the most egregious of these is Laura Loomer's repeated claims that there are millions of such cells awaiting Iran's orders to strike. Possibly the single most insane claim I have ever seen anyone with any major platform make, since it would mean a very sizable percentage of the U.S. population is actually a secret Iranian proxy army. So, as they have always said, the first casualty in war is the truth. You're going to see more and more and more lies coming at you from every direction. What do when I hear something new that I immediately suspect is a lie? If it isn't substantiated by a mountain of evidence, I immediately question its authenticity. And so these freaks in Washington, the war party in Washington, made of both sides of the fence, have been caught lying so much to sell their wars to us that it's beyond taking any of their claims on faith. Again, if you're not sure what you're hearing is a lie or the truth, it has to be substantiated by mountains of evidence before I would ever accept it. All right, that's enough for K-Talk. We're done there. I hope this helps. I can't wait to be able to break these down into smaller units instead of a 2-hour program. So I'll be back tomorrow with a health show, and I've got some really good stuff for that that's currently in the news that while we seem to be marching ever closer to nuclear catastrophe, on the one hand, we are marching closer to medical reality in the sense of what really helps people and the exposing of those things that don't. So for Global Affairs Unfiltered, I'm Jack Stockwell, and I do appreciate, oh my goodness, I think I might be the largest crowd yet. I'll be back tomorrow, and I will be setting up my podcast abilities to reach out to an awful lot more audience as long as you share. I need you to share this stuff so we can reach a bigger audience. So keep your wits about it.